What if you became the kind of person people don't just they, not a backup plan, not an option, but the standard? In a world addicted to speed, noise, and validation, there's something rare, almost untouchable, about someone who moves with quiet confidence, who doesn't beg for attention but commands it by presence alone. Remember, this episode isn't about playing games or manipulating perception. It's about rebuilding the core of how you see yourself, because when that changes, everything changes. Respect, attraction, power. They don't start with others. They start with you. So if you're tired of being overlooked, if you've had enough of feeling like the second choice, listen closely, because these 12 keys aren't just for being seen as high value, they're for becoming it. 1. Know your value before anyone else does. Every person you meet carries a silent scale in their mind, weighing who deserves their time, their respect, their loyalty. But here's the hard truth. That scale is often based on how you present yourself, not who you truly are. And if you walk into the world without having first defined your own value, others will happily define it for you, usually in ways that serve them, not you. Think about it. How many times have you downplayed your skills, your intelligence, your needs, just to fit in? How often have you smiled when you wanted to speak up, stayed when you wanted to leave, or agreed when your soul screamed, no? That's the cost of not knowing your worth. You become a reflection of other people's expectations instead of the architect of your own identity. But knowing your value is more than confidence. It's clarity. It's not about telling the world, I'm amazing. It's about no longer asking the world for permission to believe that you are. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Your worth is determined by the value of your thoughts," he wasn't talking about shallow affirmations or ego-driven self-talk. He was pointing to something deeper. The quiet discipline of how you speak to yourself when no one's listening. Because if your internal dialogue is full of doubt, shame, comparison, and fear, how can you expect others to treat you with reverence? Let's make this real. Imagine two people walk into the same room. One person has achievements, talent, even beauty, but carries themselves with hesitation, looking for approval in every glance. The other may be simpler in appearance, quieter in demeanor, but moves with calm certainty. Who do you notice first? Who seems harder to shake? It's not always the one who talks the loudest or tries the hardest. It's the one who radiates self-trust. That's the real magnetism. That's what people respect, even if they can't explain why. Knowing your value also means being willing to lose what doesn't honor it. That's the part most people avoid, because it's uncomfortable. It means walking away from relationships where you're tolerated, not celebrated. It means leaving jobs where you're underpaid and overworked, because you know you're capable of more. It means enduring a season of loneliness because you refuse to settle for surface-level connections. But that discomfort is sacred. It's the birthplace of power. There's a quiet rebellion in choosing yourself, not out of pride, but out of principle. And it starts with what you allow. When you know your worth, you don't let just anyone into your space. You don't offer unlimited access to those who haven't earned it. You don't keep proving your kindness at the expense of your peace. You draw the line, not with aggression, but with grace, and you honor it with consistency. And yes, some people will be intimidated by that. Let them be. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to become so aligned with your truth that anyone who doesn't value it simply filters themselves out. So, ask yourself this: if I fully knew my value, What would I stop doing today? Who would I stop trying to impress? What would I walk away from, not out of anger, but because it no longer reflects who I am? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary, because when you truly know your value, you stop playing roles that don't fit. You stop auditioning for love, approval, or belonging. You simply show up, fully, and those who are meant for you will recognize the difference, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. And that's where the transformation begins. 2. Stop shrinking to fit places you've outgrown. There's a silent kind of self-betrayal that doesn't scream. It whispers. It looks like biting your tongue in a room where your voice should lead. It looks like dimming your light so others don't feel overshadowed. It looks like pretending you're satisfied with less, just to avoid being seen as too much. And over time, that silence becomes a habit. That shrinking becomes your identity. But the soul knows. It remembers who you were before you started adjusting to make others comfortable. We don't always realize it, but much of our suffering comes from this exact pattern, forcing ourselves to remain small in environments we've long since outgrown. Maybe it's a relationship that used to feel like home, but now feels like a cage. Maybe it's a job that once challenged you, but now only drains you. Or maybe it's the way you speak, dress, move, carefully tailored to not offend, not disrupt, not be too different. But growth has a cost. And often, that cost is leaving behind versions of yourself that no longer reflect who you are becoming. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But here's the twist. Becoming who you are doesn't mean staying where you've always been. It means honoring that inner evolution, even when it disrupts comfort, connection, or control. Especially then. Think about how nature works. A snake must shed its skin to grow. A tree must let go of its leaves to survive the winter. And yet we, as humans, often try to carry old identities into new seasons, hoping we can keep the familiarity without sacrificing our expansion. But what you're not willing to release, you'll eventually resent. Because staying in a place you've outgrown doesn't just stunt your growth, it eats at your self-respect. There's a difference between humility and hiding. One is rooted in strength, the other in fear, and many people confuse the two. They believe that playing small is noble, that being invisible is polite. But shrinking doesn't protect you, it erases you. And if you keep erasing yourself to be accepted, don't be surprised when the world forgets to see you at all. You teach others how to treat you by the way you treat yourself. If you consistently lower your standards to keep people in your life, you train them to expect the bare minimum from you. If you stay silent when you should speak, you teach them your voice isn't worth listening to. If you bend your values just to avoid tension, you make it easier for others to cross boundaries they should never approach. So here's the challenge. Where are you still playing small? What environments are you still clinging to because they feel safe, even though they no longer serve you? And more importantly, who could you become if you finally stopped apologizing for your growth? True alignment means stepping into spaces that match your current strength, not shrinking to match the comfort of your past. It means letting go of people who only love the older version of you, because the newer version has different standards. It means outgrowing mindsets that once helped you survive, but now keep you stuck. And yes, there will be loss. But not every loss is a tragedy. Some are necessary evolutions, sacred endings that clear the path for your real life to begin. Because when you stop shrinking, you stop seeking validation from places that never had the capacity to honor you in the first place. You stop dimming your light to fit into rooms you were meant to redesign, not adjust to. This isn't about arrogance. It's about authenticity. It's about choosing to live fully, even if it means standing alone for a while. Because the moment you stop shrinking, you start expanding into the person you were always meant to be. 3. Let go of the need for constant validation. Why do we crave to be seen so desperately? Why do we check our phones, our mirrors, our conversations, hoping for some sign that we matter? For many, validation becomes oxygen. Without it, they feel invisible. But the deeper you go into yourself, the clearer it becomes. Needing constant approval is not love. It's dependency. It's the emotional equivalent of hunger that never quite gets satisfied. The problem isn't that we want to be valued. That's human. The problem is when our sense of identity starts depending on other people's reactions, when we don't feel beautiful until someone tells us, when we don't feel accomplished until it's acknowledged, when we don't trust a decision until it's praised. That's when the trap begins. Because the moment your worth depends on someone else's applause, you've given away your power. Epictetus said it without flinching. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. It's a radical truth, because it means letting go of the illusion that everyone has to understand you. It means you might make choices others don't agree with. You might follow a path they can't see. And you'll have to live with that, not in bitterness, but in quiet confidence. There's something liberating about not needing to be clapped for, about doing the right thing even when no one notices, about standing firm in your values when everyone else is bending. But this kind of presence, the kind that doesn't chase attention, takes inner work. It takes time to unlearn the habit of people-pleasing, to sit with the silence that follows when you stop broadcasting your worth and start living it privately. Here's the real shift. When you stop needing validation, you become more powerful, not less. Your energy becomes grounded, not scattered. You stop reacting to every opinion and start moving from a place of internal clarity. And people notice that. They may not say it, but they feel it. The energy of someone who no longer needs the room to cheer in order to feel strong in their stance. But let's be honest, letting go of validation is uncomfortable at first. It feels like rejection, like emptiness, like being unseen. And if you've spent most of your life being praised for being agreeable or attractive or successful, letting go of that external feedback feels like losing a part of yourself. But what you're really losing is the mask, the performance, and in its place, you find something far more enduring: self-trust. Start paying attention to your own behavior. When you post something, is it to express yourself or to be validated? When you help someone, is it from love or from a need to be needed? When you make a decision, is it based on your truth or on how you'll be perceived? The more honest you are with yourself, the more you can shift from performing to being. And here's the irony. The less you seek approval, the more authentic respect you attract. Not the shallow kind that depends on appearances, the kind that comes from people who recognize your strength. Not because you asked them to, but because you didn't. So stop chasing applause. Stop explaining your worth. Stop filtering your truth just to be liked. If you want peace, if you want power, if you want freedom, let go of the need to be validated. You'll be amazed how quiet life becomes. And in that silence, you'll meet someone you've been avoiding for far too long: yourself. 4. Set boundaries without feeling guilty. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Say no, walk away, protect your peace. But the truth is, setting boundaries isn't just about words, it's about worth. And if you've been taught that love means self-sacrifice, or that kindness means being endlessly available, then boundaries will feel like betrayal, not just to others, but to yourself. You're not weak because you find it hard to say no. You're not broken because you still feel the urge to explain yourself every time you choose yourself. That's conditioning. Years of silent programming that taught you your value came from being agreeable, from being liked, from being needed. But here's the truth most people avoid. If your love is only appreciated when it's given without limits, then it was never truly seen, only consumed. Seneca once wrote, "You must live for yourself. If you wait for others to live for you, you'll die waiting." And that might sound harsh, but it's honest. You can spend your life being there for everyone, answering every call, fixing every crisis, softening every blow, and still feel invisible when you need help. Why? Because people often get used to the version of you that serves them best, not the one that protects you most. Boundaries are the quiet language of self-respect. They're not walls, they're doors with locks. And you get to decide who has the key. You get to decide who gets your energy, your time, your presence. Not everyone deserves full access. Not everyone has earned it. And it's not cruel to admit that. It's clarity. Imagine your energy as currency. Would you hand out $100 bills to every stranger who asks? Of course not. But every time you say yes out of guilt, every time you overextend to avoid conflict, that's exactly what you're doing. You're spending your peace on things that don't nourish you. And in the end, that leaves you emotionally bankrupt, exhausted, resentful, and quietly angry at yourself for letting it happen again. The moment you set a boundary, something magical happens. The people who truly love you adjust. They may be surprised, even uncomfortable at first, but the ones who care about your well-being will learn to respect your limits. The ones who only valued your availability will slowly fade. Let them. Setting boundaries also means breaking the habit of over-explaining. You don't need a thesis to say no. I can't. That doesn't work for me. I need some time. These are complete sentences. Your peace doesn't require permission. And if someone gets upset when you draw a line, remember, the problem isn't the boundary. It's their expectation of access. But perhaps the hardest part of all is this. You have to keep reinforcing your boundary even when you feel lonely, even when guilt creeps in, even when you miss the old version of you that said yes to everything. Because the new version, the one who honors your energy, your time, your space, that version is building something unshakable: self-trust. So ask yourself, where in your life are you still saying yes when you mean no? Who in your circle constantly crosses lines you've never had the courage to draw? And what part of you still believes that love must be earned through sacrifice? It's time to let go of that illusion. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not difficult for having limits. You are not cold for choosing silence over chaos. You are learning to love yourself, not just in words, but in action, and that's a boundary no one can cross. 5. Detach without drama. Not every goodbye needs fireworks. Not every ending needs a speech. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away quietly, with your dignity intact and your peace preserved. But many of us struggle with that. We confuse closure with confrontation. We think healing requires the other person's participation, and we carry this unspoken belief that in order for our leaving to be justified, it must be understood. But here's the truth. Detachment is not about proving your point. It's not about being cold or heartless. It's about choosing yourself, without needing to create a storm in the process. You don't have to destroy what hurt you. You just have to stop feeding it. Lao Tzu wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." Detachment is the space between who you were and who you're becoming. It's the sacred in between, and it often begins with silence, the kind that feels uncomfortable at first, but becomes clarity over time. Because once you stop reacting, once you stop explaining, you start seeing things as they are, not as you hoped they'd be. But detaching with grace takes strength, especially when your identity was wrapped around being the fixer, especially when you were the one always reaching out, always explaining, always trying to make things work. Letting go feels like giving up, but it's not. It's giving yourself back. It's saying, I no longer abandon myself to keep others comfortable. We've been conditioned to believe that silence equals weakness, that distance means bitterness. But what if it means maturity? What if it means you're done with cycles that steal your energy, done with conversations that go nowhere, done with clinging to people who only show up when it's convenient? Not every disconnection requires a war. Some people just fade, and that's okay. Others may poke, provoke, try to reel you back in with guilt, with drama, with emotional games. That's when your silence becomes your boundary. That's when your peace becomes your message. And make no mistake, silence is a message. It says, I no longer need to argue for my worth. It says, I've seen enough. It says, I'm moving forward, and not everyone can come with me. And it says all of that without a single word. It's tempting to want to leave a mark, to be remembered, to have the final word. But true power doesn't care about being remembered. It cares about being free. Free from the weight of old narratives. Free from the need to be understood. Free from the idea that healing is a performance for others to witness. So how do you know you've truly detached? When your energy no longer spikes at their name. When you don't check your phone hoping for a message. When you can think of the past without bitterness. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that stayed too long. Detachment isn't indifference, it's wisdom. It's knowing when something has run its course and no longer serves your growth. It's stepping back, not with resentment, but with respect, for yourself and for the season that's ending. So ask yourself, what relationships, habits, or thought patterns are you still holding on to out of fear, not love? What drama are you still fueling because a part of you is afraid of what silence might reveal? And what would happen if you simply stopped? No announcement, no explanation, just peace. 6. Protect your energy like a sacred space. There's a reason you feel drained around certain people. There's a reason some conversations leave you heavier, not lighter. Your energy isn't infinite. It's a sacred currency. And just like you wouldn't leave your front door wide open for anyone to walk through, you shouldn't leave your emotional and mental space unguarded. Not everyone deserves access. Not every interaction is worth your inner peace. Jim Rohn once said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." It's not just a catchy phrase. It's a reminder that your environment is shaping you every day, often in ways you don't even notice. The people you allow close influence your mindset, your habits, your beliefs. So if you're constantly surrounded by chaos, negativity, or emotional neediness, don't be surprised when you start carrying that same weight, even when it's not yours. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's strategic, because everything you want to build, your growth, your clarity, your emotional balance depends on having the space to breathe, to think, to be. If your life is filled with noise, you'll never hear your own voice. If you're always reacting, you'll forget how to feel. Start looking at your energy like a garden. What you feed grows. What you neglect dies. Who and what you allow in either nurtures your spirit or tramples it. So ask yourself honestly, who waters your roots and who pulls at your branches? What habits recharge you and which ones drain you until you're numb? This doesn't mean cutting everyone out or living in isolation. It means becoming intentional. It means recognizing when a conversation is no longer productive, when a friendship has become one-sided, when your time is being consumed by people who only take but never pour back. And it means having the courage to act on that awareness, to distance yourself, even quietly, from what disturbs your center. But here's where it gets even more real. Sometimes the energy you need to protect yourself from is your own. The overthinking, the self-doubt, the constant guilt of not doing enough. We often sabotage our own peace before the world even gets the chance. So protecting your energy also means setting boundaries with your own thoughts, catching the inner critic mid-sentence, replacing over-analysis with presence, practicing stillness instead of spiraling. There's deep power in knowing how to pull back, in turning off your phone, in saying, "I don't have the space for this right now," in recognizing that just because someone wants your attention doesn't mean they've earned it. And just because something is urgent to someone else doesn't mean it's a priority for you. You'll know you're protecting your energy when you stop explaining your peace, when you stop over-apologizing for needing space, when you no longer feel the need to justify your silence. Because real peace doesn't always look polite. Sometimes it looks like not answering the call, not joining the drama, not attending the argument. And yes, some people will not understand this version of you, the one who chooses presence over pressure, stillness over stress, detachment over performance. But that's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be well, to be whole, to be awake to what really matters. So the next time you feel that pull, that quiet urge to disconnect from what drains you, honor it. Don't second-guess it. That's your soul trying to protect the part of you that's still healing, still growing, still remembering that not everything deserves a response. Not every fire needs your oxygen, and not every person deserves a front-row seat to your life. 7. Be okay with being misunderstood. One of the most painful truths in life is this: you can speak from the heart, act with integrity, show up with love, and still be misunderstood. You can be honest and be seen as arrogant, be kind and be seen as weak, be silent and be seen as cold. And no matter how carefully you try to explain yourself, some people will hear only what their wounds allow. That's where most people get stuck. They spend their energy trying to correct the narrative, trying to fix how they're seen, trying to make everyone understand. But the pursuit of being fully understood by everyone is not a noble goal. It's a losing battle. Because at some point, you have to decide, do I want to live a life of depth or a life of constant explanation? Nietzsche once wrote, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." Not everyone is tuned to your frequency. Not everyone has the emotional capacity to interpret your silence, your passion, your detachment, your drive. Some people will mislabel your growth as selfishness. Others will see your healing as distance. That's not your burden to carry. There's a quiet kind of strength that comes when you no longer need to be understood to feel at peace. When you stop chasing closure from people who were never listening. when you realize that clarity isn't always a shared experience. Sometimes it's personal, internal, yours alone. Think about how many times you've stayed in unhealthy dynamics just to avoid being seen as the bad one. How many times you've over-explained your boundaries, your needs, your decisions, not because you were unsure, but because you feared rejection or judgment. But here's the truth. People who need you to explain your worth will never truly see it. And people who truly see you won't need the explanation. Being misunderstood can feel lonely, but that loneliness is sacred. It's the space where you begin to trust your own voice above the noise. It's where your integrity matures. It's where your self-respect stops being negotiable. Because when you learn to live without the need for constant approval, you become unshakable. Your peace no longer depends on who gets you. And ironically, that's when the right people start to appear. The ones who hear your silence and understand its meaning. The ones who don't need a perfect version of you, just a real one. The ones who don't punish your boundaries but respect them without being told. But you'll never find them if you're still stuck trying to convince the wrong ones. So the next time someone misreads your actions, questions your path, or distorts your intention, breathe. Let it pass. You're not responsible for how they choose to interpret what they were never willing to understand in the first place. This is your permission to stop explaining your peace, to stop justifying your healing, to stop narrating your evolution for people who only listen when they feel centered in the story. Let your life speak for itself. Let your actions reflect your values. Let your silence protect your soul. The right people will hear your music, even if they don't understand every note. 8. Let your presence speak louder than your words. There's a power that doesn't require performance, a strength that doesn't come from how much you say, but from how you carry yourself when you say nothing at all. We live in a world where noise is everywhere. People talk to be heard, post to be seen, perform to be validated. But in that storm of voices, there's something undeniably magnetic about someone who walks into a room without demanding attention, and yet somehow has it. You've seen it before. That person who moves slowly, calmly, without needing to prove anything. They're not the loudest. They're not chasing the spotlight. But their presence settles the room. That's not an accident. It's intentional energy, the result of inner work, self-trust, and the quiet decision to stop chasing approval and start embodying it. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic." That panic shows up in how we over-explain, overshare, overdo, constantly trying to signal our worth. But the irony is, the more you try to prove your value with words, the more people question if it's real. Because true presence doesn't need a press release, it just is. Your energy enters the room before you do. The way you walk, the way you hold eye contact, the way you listen, these things speak volumes about your inner world. Are you calm? Are you grounded? Are you at peace with yourself? Or are you still fighting for space in a world that hasn't yet given it? To let your presence speak, you must first get quiet with yourself. Strip away the performative layers. Sit with the discomfort of silence. Learn to enjoy your own company so deeply that you no longer rush to fill empty space with noise. Presence isn't about being perfect. It's about being whole. And wholeness isn't loud. It's stable. But make no mistake, presence doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean you let life walk over you while you smile in stillness. It means your strength runs deeper than reaction, that you're selective with your words because you know their weight, that you move with purpose, not panic, that you act from values, not from fear. If you want to be treated like a luxury, stop explaining your worth like a bargain. Let your standards be known by how you move, not by how often you announce them. Speak less about your intentions and more through your actions. Because people may question your words, but they rarely forget your energy. Think about this. When was the last time you were deeply impressed by someone just by how they showed up? Not what they wore, not what they said, but the quiet clarity they carried. That kind of presence is rare because it's earned through discipline, through boundaries, through a commitment to self-awareness. And the beauty is, you don't need to be anyone else to build it. You just need to stop diluting yourself, stop rushing, stop trying to prove. Just be. Be so aligned that your presence becomes the standard, that your silence becomes a language only the right people understand. So next time you feel the urge to overshare to gain approval, pause, breathe, step into yourself. Your presence, when fully claimed, says everything they need to know. 9. Don't just talk standards, live them. It's easy to say what you deserve. It's easy to write it in journals, declare it in conversations, post about it online. I deserve respect. I won't settle. I have high standards. But here's the truth many avoid. Standards aren't what you say you want. They're what you consistently allow, what you tolerate, what you choose, what you return to even after you've promised yourself you'd never go back. We often speak about our worth as if it's a concept, something abstract, untouchable. But worth is practical. It shows up in the small daily decisions you make, in the phone calls you answer, in the people you give second, third, and 10th chances to, in how quickly you betray yourself just to avoid tension. Every time you compromise your values for comfort or connection, you're teaching the world what your real standard is. Not the one you talk about, but the one you live. Epictetus said it plainly. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. That means stop telling people what kind of treatment you expect and start making it obvious through your actions. When you respect yourself deeply, you don't need to advertise it. It shows in how you say no, in how you walk away, in how you don't chase after anyone who treats you like an afterthought. But this isn't easy, because there's often a gap between what we believe and what we practice. You may believe you deserve a peaceful relationship, but still stay in one filled with chaos, hoping love will fix what boundaries are supposed to handle. You may believe you deserve financial security, but continue habits that drain your wallet and your self-trust. You may believe you deserve emotional respect, but shrink your needs because you don't want to seem too much. Living your standards means getting radically honest with yourself, asking the hard questions. Where am I still settling? What am I pretending not to notice? What part of me is still afraid that if I raise my standards, I'll be alone? And then, when the answers come, having the courage to act on them. Not tomorrow, not next year. Now, because here's the real cost of not living your standards: resentment. Resentment toward others for not treating you better, and resentment toward yourself for letting them. Over time, that quiet self-betrayal becomes a weight. And no amount of external success can make up for the internal erosion caused by living below your own bar. The solution isn't to become rigid or harsh. It's to become clear. Clear on what aligns and what doesn't. Clear on what you want and what you're no longer available for. And most importantly, clear on the fact that the world doesn't give you what you say you want. It gives you what you demand by the way you live. So if you want to be seen as high value, become non-negotiable with your peace, with your time, with your energy. Let people feel your boundaries without you needing to shout them. Let your daily choices reflect a deep respect for your own journey. Because when you live your standards, not perfectly but consistently, you no longer need to convince anyone of your worth. They'll see it, or they won't. But either way, you'll feel it. 10. Be unavailable to inconsistency. One of the most powerful decisions you will ever make is to stop entertaining half-effort. Because inconsistency is not confusion, it's communication. And people will always test your boundaries, not with words, but with behavior. If someone keeps disappearing and reappearing in your life, if they make promises in the light and disappear in the dark, if they give just enough to keep you hopeful, but never enough to feel safe, that's not a gray area. That's a red flag you've normalized. Being unavailable to inconsistency means refusing to participate in patterns that insult your intelligence and drain your spirit. It means you no longer accept breadcrumbs when you've made it clear that you bring the full table. It means you stop rationalizing emotional instability just because the highs are intoxicating. Because at some point you have to ask, why am I making room for people who only show up when it's convenient for them? Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And we do, especially when we keep emotionally investing in uncertainty. We waste time waiting for mixed signals to become clear. We waste energy interpreting silence, replaying words, trying to decode behavior that's already telling us everything we need to know. But if someone's presence in your life causes more questions than answers, that's your answer. The deeper issue isn't just the other person, it's what part of you still finds comfort in chaos. Inconsistency is often familiar to people who were raised on unstable affection. If love once meant proving yourself, earning attention, or waiting to be chosen, you may now unconsciously associate uncertainty with desire. But that's not love. That's emotional survival masquerading as chemistry. To truly break this cycle, you have to redefine what connection means to you. Real connection is not built on adrenaline, it's built on emotional reliability. You know what real attraction looks like? Peace, safety, presence. When someone says they'll call, and they do. When they don't just apologize, but change. When you don't have to shrink or second-guess yourself to be accepted. Being unavailable to inconsistency means you'd rather be alone than be confused. That your self-respect won't bend to accommodate someone else's immaturity. That you're done hoping people will rise to meet your love when they've shown you they can't even meet themselves. It also means holding yourself to the same standard. Are you being consistent with you? With your values, your self-care, your goals? Because inconsistency starts from within. And if you're still wavering on what you want, still negotiating with your own standards, still choosing comfort over clarity, the outside world will mirror that indecision right back to you. So here's your invitation. Make a list. Write down what consistent behavior looks like to you, not in fantasy, but in reality. What does it feel like to be respected? What does it sound like when someone honors your time, your space, your heart? And then, when you meet someone who can't offer that, you walk, not out of anger, not to make a point, but because your soul has simply outgrown confusion. You are not a maybe, you are not a backup plan, you are not an emotional experiment someone figures out when they're bored. You are either a yes or a no, and anything in between is a place you no longer belong. 11. Stop explaining yourself to people who don't care. There's a deep exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to be understood, especially by people who have already made up their minds about you. You explain your silence, you explain your boundaries, you explain your distance, your healing, your transformation, not because you owe them an answer, but because a part of you still craves their validation, still hopes that if you explain it just right, they'll finally get it. But some people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. Or worse, they don't listen at all. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important." And that's the kind of loneliness that stings the most. Being surrounded by people who hear your words but never your meaning. People who mock your growth because it threatens their comfort. People who confuse your clarity for coldness. And the more you explain, the more you drain. So here's the truth. You don't owe everyone access to your inner world, especially not the ones who minimize it, mock it, or twist it. Your peace isn't a group discussion. Your decisions aren't up for a vote. And your evolution isn't a performance for critics who never supported your becoming in the first place. There's a sacredness in holding parts of yourself back from those who haven't earned them. It's not about being mysterious. It's about being wise. Discernment means knowing the difference between those who deserve to know you deeply and those who just want to be close enough to have an opinion. And let's be honest, explaining yourself can become a form of begging to be seen, to be understood, to be forgiven for choosing yourself. But self-respect begins where explanations end, when you finally say, "This is my truth, and I no longer need it to be palatable for you to accept it." Of course, it's not easy, especially if you're someone who values harmony, clarity, or closure. Especially if you grew up believing that love has to be earned through endless justification. But what if the closure you're seeking isn't about them understanding? What if it's about you accepting that they won't, and choosing peace anyway, because there's power in silence? Not the kind that suppresses, but the kind that protects. When someone crosses a line and you don't argue, you walk. When they play confused and you don't clarify, you detach. When they provoke and you don't react, you rise. The more you heal, the less you explain. Not because you're hiding, but because you realize that those who truly care will never need a full explanation just to offer basic respect. And those who demand an explanation just to justify their lack of support, they were never on your side to begin with. So stop oversharing with people who use your vulnerability as ammunition. Stop rehearsing your boundaries like an apology. Stop explaining your glow-up to people who only knew you when you were dimming your light. You owe no one an explanation for choosing peace, for outgrowing patterns, for changing your mind, for walking away, for becoming someone your past self never had the courage to imagine. Some things can stay unsaid. Some goodbyes don't need closure. Some people don't need another explanation. They need distance. 12. Become the standard, not the seeker. There comes a point in your life where you have to stop waiting to be chosen. Stop hoping someone will finally see your worth, finally recognize your value, finally offer you what you've been craving all along. That moment, when you stop waiting and start becoming, that's when everything shifts. Because you were never meant to beg for attention. You were meant to command it, not through force, but through presence. Through becoming the kind of person who doesn't chase value, but embodies it. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are, not who the world expects, not who others find convenient, but who you truly are, underneath the masks, the conditioning, the compromises." And when you do that, something remarkable happens. You stop seeking. You stop trying to fit into places that don't feel right. You stop molding yourself just to be accepted, because you're no longer available for anything that doesn't match your energy, your vision, your truth. Becoming the standard means asking more of yourself, not from a place of pressure, but from purpose. It means dressing like you respect yourself, speaking like you believe in yourself, moving like you know your time is valuable. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. A quiet decision to stop shrinking, stop apologizing, and start living like your life is already worthy. Because it is. This also means getting comfortable with solitude. The road to becoming is not crowded. It's quiet. It's filled with days where no one claps for you, where your growth is invisible to everyone except you. But that's where real transformation happens, when you're no longer performing, just practicing the highest version of yourself. It also means letting go of relationships, habits, and mindsets that were built from the seeker's mentality. When you were trying to earn love, prove yourself, make others like you, that version of you had a role. But it's time to outgrow it. Because becoming the standard doesn't mean you think you're better than others. It means you're no longer willing to be less than yourself. And yes, this shift will intimidate some people. They'll say you've changed, and you have. They'll say you've become distant, and you have, from anything that tried to keep you small. But the people who are meant for you, they won't be repelled by your growth. They'll be inspired by it. They'll rise to meet you there or respectfully exit. Either way, you're not chasing. So take a moment and ask yourself, if I were already the standard, how would I speak? What would I accept? How would I show up every day? Start doing those things, even if it feels uncomfortable, especially then. Because the more you live like the version of you you've been dreaming of, the faster you become it. Not in theory, in reality. You were never meant to be an option. You were meant to be the example. So stop waiting to be chosen. Become so whole that others have no choice but to rise or walk away. Become so certain in who you are that silence becomes your filter. Become the standard. Good, because this is the part that most people skip. They listen to content like this. They feel the fire for a moment. They nod and agree. And then they go back to living the same way. But not you. Not this time. You didn't listen to these 12 keys just to feel inspired. You listened because something inside you already knew. You've been settling, shrinking, explaining, overgiving, and you're done. You're done being seen as a backup plan. Done making excuses for your standards. Done tolerating the kind of energy you would never give. This is your moment to rise, not by shouting louder, but by becoming quieter, clearer, more grounded in who you are. When you walk into a room, your presence should whisper, "I don't need you to choose me, I already did." That's the kind of power no one can fake. That's the kind of worth no one can question, because it's not written on your profile, it's etched into your character. Remember this, being a luxury isn't about perfection, it's about being intentional. It's about knowing what you bring and refusing to offer it to those who treat it like a convenience. It's about raising your standards, not to impress others, but to protect your peace. So starting today, stop explaining yourself. Stop chasing closure. Stop making space for energy that only shows up when it's easy. You are the standard now, and when you truly believe that, your world starts to shift. People will either meet you there or they'll remove themselves. Either way, you win. And if this episode moved something in you, if it woke up that quiet power that's been waiting for permission to speak, give it that permission. Share this message with someone who needs it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And most of all, live it. Because the world doesn't need another person waiting to be picked. It needs more people brave enough to become the one doing the choosing. Your journey starts now.